So this is me. I'm Sue. I run my own business. I work primarily with Power BI, but all sorts of data solutions. And basically, whenever a business has a problem, I have to use whatever tools I've got to meet their solutions. I am a completely fanatic runner. I run marathons for fun, and so part of what I'm going to show you is how I use data in Garmin to help me plan and achieve my targets. I'm also a data platform MVP, which is quite a fun thing to be. And I run Devon and Cornwall Power BI Meetup Group. It's a virtual one. We meet every week on a Tuesday at 6. Anyone's welcome to join online. And we have some pretty amazing speakers. We had Gustav Dudak on Tuesday, who was giving us all sorts of visualizations. And we had a session from Michael Kowalski, which I'll talk about during this session, which is all about Python and semantic links. So out of curiosity, can you just put your hands up if you've used Python before? Oh, good. Okay, brilliant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a little bit about an introduction. Oh, a little introduction. Nice little Python there. A little bit introduction to Python, why it's so cool, touch on some of the libraries. And then I'm just going to go through some of the use cases that I've used it for within my basically business career and in my personal learning. So we're going to look at data, APIs. We're going to talk a little bit about how you can use it for reports, visualization, machine learning, SemPy, and Semantic Links Lab. It's going to be quite fast-paced because apparently I'm only allowed 45 minutes to 50 minutes because there's pizza and Laura following, but my resources are on GitHub and you can always watch it back. And I will point you to wherever you need to go to learn. So let's get started. Hopefully I won't be heckled in there. I will. So first stop, it's really, really easy to get data into Fabric. So I'm using Python within Fabric. The brilliant thing about using Python within Fabric is you don't have to have an install of Python on your desktop. You don't have to worry about your pathway, how you're setting things up. It's just so easy to get started. The trial, I've just extended it again for another 60 days, so it's a perfect chance to play and try. The quickest way to get started is to set up one lake on your machine. You can drag your files into one lake, and then once they're in one lake within your Fabric environment, and I'm sure you've seen this 100 times, you've then got your lake house, and within the lake house, you then have your files, and you can just pull your files in and import them in. I just want to go through just a little bit. Can you see the screen at the back? Just checking. All okay? Right, so just a very, very little quick. The first thing I'm doing is I'm going to pull in a CSV file. Once I pull in the CSV file, the thing that takes the longest is setting up the instance of Spark for it to get set up and working. Once it's pulled in, it's really, really easy to pull it in. You've dragged it into your one lake, you pull it across into your notebook. Then once it's in, you actually then have Data Wrangler. This is the quickest, easiest way that you can get started with Python. Data Wrangler then gives you your data frame. So I've pulled it in, I've called it DF. DF is what we normally call a table, a tabular model within Python. And once you've loaded it in, it just helps you do everything that you want to do. So it's very drag and drop, very easy, similar to Power Query in Power BI. It just gives you the steps. So you've got that user interface. So you can have a look, you can see, how many columns have I got? Have I got any rows with missing values? We can go through here and we can drop missing values. We can fill missing values. And this is a nice way to start learning because you can think if I want to drop some rows, you can just practice with this and it writes the code for you. Then once you've written the code, and you apply it, it'll come up with something like this, where it creates a function and it actually writes it for you. It tells you how to drop any duplicates, how if you want any missing data in a column, you can drop them within a column. You could select certain columns that you need. So you've got some here, Like you can actually say, you know, which ones I want. So you can start to see the syntax with your Python code by using Data Wrangler. And that's a nice way to learn. If you find a data set that you're interested in, and I always find I'm more keen to learn and teach myself if I find something that's of interest. So for me, it's running. So anything to do with running, and I'm quite interested. And you could just start working through it and seeing, you know, dot head will give me the top 10 rows. And the aim of this session, I've done an hour-long session on this, which is it's on YouTube under the London Business Analytics Group and my user group. So if you are new to learning Python, there's a whole hour session where I run through this, and I'll take you through it step by step. So it shows you, the first thing we do when we're going to code, print hello world, just some of the syntax in there. And the great thing about using Jupyter notebooks is that you can actually write your code, but you can also use Markdown to actually comment it out. So if you're sharing or you're writing a notebook that you're using, you can actually explain what you're doing, so you can be kind to yourself. So when you look back on it in 6 months' time and you're not quite in the wormhole that you were in when you were writing the code, you can explain what you were doing, and you can set it up, and I'll show you an example of this. But I just wanted to go through a little bit of the programming constraints within Python. So we've got the same if. Python likes to have spaces or tabs. So it's very clear that you have those spaces or tabs for actually indentation. So we've got an if, we've got our else statement. So this is our logic, because if you start using ChatGPT or something like that to help you write your code, it's important to understand just what it's trying to do or how it's set up, so that you can read the language. So we've got an if, we've got an else. We can use variables within there. So just some of the variable rules. You know, that it's they are case sensitive. It can't be one of the special words. We can actually get it to print comments out for us. And then we use an elif. So if we've got an if and then an elif, and then we've got an else. So we've got these if statements. Then what we can start to do is we can start to use parameters, and we can build our function, and then we can add our parameters in. So it gives us, it's really quite nice how you can structure it, and you can write your notes, and it's set up so that it's easy to read, because some code isn't so easy to read. We can define a list of numbers. So now we start going through for loops, and you'll see quite often when you start using Python, or we use for statements or while statements to actually loop through different constraints that we're looking at. So we can iterate over a list to say number in numbers, and you can see how it's set up. So it's got the indentation. It's nice and simple to read. And I just wanted to pull your attention to this bit. So what it uses now is this is really nice, because what you do, that little F and the squarely brackets, it actually stops you having to define the case. So, you know, sometimes you have to concatenate things together, and you have to say, if it's a string, you have to put a string in front of it, or if it's an integer, you have to put an integer in front of it, which can be a real pain. And if you forget the plus, or is it a plus or is it an ampersand, depending which language you're in, these F statements, and I can't remember it, can't remember what it's called, but it's only fairly recently. F strings, thank you. The F strings make such a difference, don't they, to actually writing your code. So it just basically within there is saying, don't worry about what the number is or what case it is, just pop it in there and it will run. So that makes it quite simple. We can use while statements as well as for statements, so we can actually print count off so that it will run through. And then we can also get it to stop if we want it to stop. And we can add in some error checking. So we can say, check if it's an integer, if it's not, is it an instance, then stop, and then raise different errors. So you can see, and I quite like keeping this in and showing the errors, because if you are exploring how to do something with ChatGPT or whatever your AI choice is, you always get error messages, or I always get error messages anyway. And it's a really nice way to learn to understand what's happening with your code, why is it not working. Then you can go back and you can explore and you can problem solve. So what you can do here, this is a way that you can actually put in if statements, you can raise a value error, so you can get to write down and explain what some of the errors can be when you're working through the code. Within Python, we have lots of different libraries. So this, to me, is one of the beauties of Python. It is so incredibly cool because although I'm using this here to go through, I'm pulling a CSV file and I'm doing something similar to what I might use within Power Query, Python has many different libraries. And what libraries are they're basically a collection of specific code for different things that you might do. So if I'm using, if I'm looking at it for data analytics or data analysis, then I would use NumPy, and I might pull in pandas. And those are the two libraries that we specifically use for messing around with data within Python. But there are other libraries like IPython, which will allow us to display our data frames or whatever we want to display in really nice HTML language. We can use things like Tabulate, which is another library, to actually put a table around our data. We can also use things like Beautiful Soup, which allows us to scrape through the internet and scrape HTML files. And I'm going to touch on some of the other libraries shortly, but that to me is the really beauty of Python. It's not just about pulling in data, it's about the things that we can do and we can use it. And to me, it's a bit like a sort of, what's it called when you go camping and you have one of those things with knives and Swiss Army knife. Yeah, it's just Swiss Army knife of programming when you're working with data and you have solutions. Oh, yeah, no, it's Swiss Army knife. So we have within data analysis, NumPy is absolutely brilliant for your numerical functions, and it's the backbone of data frames in series. And then we use matplotlib, which is really good for actually plotting data. And pandas is what you use for cleaning data. So that just gives you an insight into how we structure and how we can use Python. Any questions so far? Nope, all good? Nope. No questions from you, Laura? So when I first started using the Garmin data and downloading it from Garmin, I used to have to email them. They would then send me an email back. And then from there, I would download the CSV files. Then I'd have to put the CSV files into SharePoint. And it was a bit of a pain in the neck. They wouldn't give me access because it's only a commercial developer, and I think they'd had some sort of security risk. So they're particularly difficult about having different types of data that you can pull in. But what you can also get from Garmin is not just a CSV, you can get JSON files. So when I talk about libraries again, there are different libraries that you can pull in to actually read in JSON files. JSON files, hello. JSON files are a bit of a pain. They're not quite like CSV files. They're always nested, and they're nested within nested. Power Query is okay-ish, but it's not as good as Python about pulling out the nest. I don't know these people, and I'm first. So all right. So Power Query, I love Power Query. Power Query is really cool to play with. Not so good with JSON, bit of a pain with APIs as well. Whereas Python, you pull in different libraries and it just chews it up. It's like butter through a knife through butter. It just goes through it. So when you start looking at your Python files, this is my Garmin with JSON, you can see in there, I've just got one particular row of data because it's nested. So there is code that you can use, the df.print schema. So I actually ask it, okay, print out this schema for me. And then it comes out and you see that actually it's nested within here. So then can you see it all right? Oh, no, yeah, cool. So within it, we've got things like latitude, GMT, local, and different types of sets, different sets, a huge amount of data, which is a real pain after I've exploded it out that I might want to start to use. So from the PySpark functions, I import in explode. Once I import in explode, I particular that specific thing and pull out the activities. So that then, and this is where how we can use Markdown to actually explain what we're doing. So once you're in the wormhole and you're right in the middle of it, you know what you're doing, but 6 months later, after you've been playing with something else or doing some other solution, I do all sorts of things. I then find this really useful because it reminds me what I was doing and why I was doing it. So I write my logic. So within that, I want to actually pull out and find the data that I need. So I created a list for the column path, iterated through, and you can see in here, we've got the F strings where we put in the different paths and the field names, and then check to make sure it's a structure type, and then return the column path. So what we then end up being able to do is actually look at the columns, and then from the columns, I can then decide which ones that I want. I can go through the columns and then pull out the different columns that I want. I didn't write all of this. I used ChatGPT back and forth to check what I wanted to pull out, because I can't remember all of this. I'm getting old. But even so, what I do understand, and if we go back to here, we've got our if, our elif, and our else, and we've got our error catching. So as long as you understand the basic principles and you check and you validate and you know what it is that you want to come out with, then I find it is you're back and forth and you're checking with the resources that you have on hand to make sure that the data is valid and the results that are coming out are correct. And that's something that's really important to do, as we all know, because otherwise it can get it wrong, which it does many times. So you always have to check, but I find it's a really nice learning process to go back and forth and to understand and to teach yourself what you're doing and how you're doing it if you have that problem that you want to solve. So please don't think that I'm not, I'm back and forth and I'm checking and I'm learning it. So once I go through, I won't bore you with all of this, but I go through and I pick out the particular columns that I want. I filter the data frame to pull out the columns that I want. And then from there, I've got my key columns, my average speed, my timestamps, activity types, basic running type things. And then I can go through and I can actually then start to carry out some analysis because I've got that data through and it's pulling it through. And we can then start to, use things like .describe, which will pull out the descriptive statistics. And the other thing with Garmin data and lots of other data, it doesn't necessarily come through as the right date time that you might want. Sometimes we have Unix data in there. And this is where Python is really good because it has date time libraries. So any type of date time that you might have, which isn't your standard date time, it will just work it out. And sometimes I've had other data that's come through from different things. You just take a snipping shot of it and say, what's this? And then it'll go, oh, actually, what they've done is it's just been, it's a different timestamp that is actually been, they've got a code on it or something. But what it's really good at is understanding what the code is to try and translate it when you haven't got any logic to understand what you're being given and why. So it's quite nice there where you can actually start to check minimum dates, running dates, and go through the different effects and labels that you can do. So this is using a JSON. But what we can also do is we can use APIs, and from again another library, there's a library called Garmin Connect. So instead of actually having to get my summarized files, pulling in a JSON, I can actually attach straight to and pull in and attach to the Garmin Connect using an API. It would be nice if the data that came out of the JSON was the same structure and the same names as the API. No. So again, you're then trying to think, why would you not do that? I don't know. But anyway, so there's a library, Garmin Connect. Someone who's a keen runner and a better programmer than me has created their own Garmin Connect library, which they've had verified. And there's a set of libraries called PyPy, where you have verified libraries for pretty much anything. So you can find a library for whatever you're interested in. You can even, it was very cool, there's a cryptography library where you can actually put your username and password in and it encrypts it, and then you can pull the encryption out. So it's very cool. Doesn't work in a pipeline though. So I had to pull that one out because I was trying to set up in a pipeline. But if you're interested in something, this is what drives you to learn and to play and to explore. If you're not interested in and you don't have a reason to do it, then you tend not to explore and find out how to use things. So basically, I set up the API, pulled the API in, pulled my activities in, fetched all the activities through, popped them into a data frame, found out what the columns were, chose which columns I wanted. You can see Plymouth running, swimming, and then I can go through and I can actually define my data frame. What I wanted to do was, because I'm a bit of an addict, I ran Florence Marathon and I got a time of 3:52, and woohoo, yeah, no, I was really chuffed. So which was my best time. And then I ran Budapest. I was running Budapest a year later, and with running, it's all mental. So you have to believe that you can do it. And one of the ways that you can believe that you can do it is you can give yourself the critical evidence. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to go through and pull in my data from, say, 10 weeks before Florence, and then compare it to 10 weeks before Budapest, so that when I went to run Budapest, I could compare and I could check my heart rate and I could check my time and my distance and everything. So that and you can relate this to business scenarios or whatever you wanted to do, but I could then go through and using, so it's all pulled in my maths, because Garmin connects the data in. I popped it into ChatGPT and said, "What do you reckon? And give me some code to pull it out." And it told me I'd do it in 3 days. It's like, what? But it's because he was reading it in meters as opposed to miles. So it's things like that. You always have to validate your data and check what it's measuring. So within that, then I actually, you do all the calculations, and there's a maths library. So you pull in the maths library and you work out what the calculation is, and then you convert it to be what you want it to convert it to, and then blah, 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 blah. But what you can actually then do is start then mapping your distance and your duration. And then what I did is I then looked at the outliers and I got it to compare and tell me whether, I was on track and whether I was going to achieve what I wanted to achieve. And I nearly did, but not quite. So I got, if we move this over the way, just that the way, I got 3:55 qualified for Chicago though. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, just so cool. So that's, for me, that's why I love Python, because I use it for work. So, APIs coming in, we had an API, it needed a token refreshed every 30 minutes. Power Query would have been a complete nightmare to do that. Python just eats it up. So we had another example where I had one company that's moving from one software supplier to another software supplier, neither of which would give us the code for the direct debit mandates. So direct debit mandates, the data comes out of the data frame and it's given to us in a certain spaces, certain characters, things like that, then has to go into HSBC, and you can use Python to actually say, right, take that data from this text file, and after so many spaces, make this the account number, make this the sort code, then push it into another data frame and structure it with this many spaces and make it this type of text and put something in front, then set up the headers and the footers so they're exactly the same. And that's the type of thing that Python eats up. If I'd had to do that in paginated reports, if any of you have used paginated reports, it wouldn't have been quite such a short. So I love paginated reports, but I'd rather do it in Python. Much nicer, really nice. So that's the way. But by playing with it, because I had a thing that I wanted to achieve, it allowed me to learn, and it gave me the confidence and the skills to be able to explore, which then had an impact upon the solutions that I did for my business. Now, anyone had a look at SemPy yet? Yes. Nice. Yeah. So I went to Stockholm probably about a month or so ago, wasn't it? It's the Fabric Conference. Best session there was by a chap called Michael Kowalski. Elegant BI is his blog post, and he is just outstanding. So he has written a whole series of Python libraries that basically allow you to attach to any data set and list all of the workspaces and anything within your tenant. It's just pure genius, and it's easy, really easy. And so he's definitely someone I've got to see. He attended our user group and did an hour session. And he's got a post called Elegant BI. And he's also responsible for the best practice analyzer rules that you use within Tabular Editor. Does anyone use Tabular Editor? Yeah. So you import in that he's the one who's got the website for the best practice rules that you use within Tabular Editor, which for those of you that don't use Tabular Editor, you really should. The best practice rules are basically looking at your structure and the model of your data and giving you advice on how to improve it to make sure that it's efficient and effective. So SemPy, what we can do is we can install Semantic Link Labs. Semantic Link Labs are basically a library that allow you to attach to objects within Fabric. So once we import import SemPy.fabric as Fabric, and these are really cool because all you have to do is put your workspace name in, your report name, and your semantic model name. Just 3 things. And this code would work for any of your reports within your Fabric environment, as long as you are owner of the workspace. So when we pull these variables in, and then we create a report that we issue over. And then look at this, fabric.list_tables, and it lists all of the tables for me within this particular report. So it shows me which tables I've got, what dates I've got, what they are. You can actually use either the model ID or the model name. It doesn't matter. It'll use both, and it will pull it in. I'm going to give you a URL for his GitHub, which will have everything in it, so you can access it, because it gets even better than this. Once you've done this, you can actually list all of the tables by model name. And you know when we had the 4 instance where I showed you where you can iterate over? You can iterate over all of the tables within your environment. It's really cool. And then within here, you can actually pull in and you can view a report. So we can actually have a Python notebook, which is holding Power BI reports in it. From Power BI client, import report. I mean, it's really straightforward and easy to write. It's not that complex. I've tried writing C# script and I find it a bit scary. So this is quite nice and easy to read. So I can pull in my report, which is fully interactive, within my notebook. Maybe take a bit of a while to read. Oh, it does work, honestly. Yeah, it does work, honestly. I think I changed the name of it. So anyway, what we can do, moving on quickly. So instead of just looking at the tables within my data set, I can list all of the data sets within a particular workspace. So this is quite useful for documentation, or if you're exploring, or you can see what's happening. So nice, straightforward, easily formatted in a Jupyter notebook, where you can also use the actual cells to explain what you're doing as markdown text. So it gives you the documentation that you need. All you need to do is change the parameter for the workspace. Within there, I can list the columns. So I can say, show me these particular columns. So again, it's going back to what I was doing when I was playing with my Garmin data to try and pick out which columns that I wanted. So it's that same syntax. It makes it quite straightforward. So we're listing the columns. And I can refresh. the cache, and I can pull out a list of my measures. So I can see all of the measures that I have within this particular report in Python, and then I can post it in my notebook, and I can actually, and I'll show you some more things that you can do with it. And I can visualize my relationships. So I can go through, I can ask it to list my relationships and show me, and you'll see they're all correct. They're all in one direction. Yeah. Possibly not yet.
Did we hear that? Because that type of document.
Yeah. But I'm going to show you, because I don't need to how to blog it, because he's already done it. I know, but it's really difficult, isn't it? Because you're too busy learning. I don't want to blog. I'm here. So what you can do is you can even plot. So you can get it using the different visualization libraries within Python to actually plot where your relationships are coming from. So we have it through there. We can have all of our different relationships that are coming through. But it's all very well me standing here and showing you how to do this. Wouldn't it be good if you could play with this and do this yourself? You can. So on here, this is Microsoft Fabric samples. It's the GitHub, and it's written by Michael Kowalski. So you can do this, and it's dead simple. So you open up Fabric, you then pull in these different semantic link samples, and if you have a look at the GitHub, it's really nicely documented, so you can see how to do it. So what he did, one of the first things that he does is he gives you a link to one of the retail analysis sample PBIX. So it's a PBIX that you can download and you can install, publish it to one of your workspaces. Once you've published it to one of your workspaces, then what you have here, see you've got, and I'll give you this link if I haven't done it already. You can actually download the PBIX, publish it to your workspace. Then what Michael's done is he's created tutorials for so many different things. So within here, this tells you how to extract and calculate Power BI measures from a Jupyter notebook. So within the notebook itself, it shows you how to sign in. It gives you the URL, because this is all written in the notebook, and in the notebook in Markdown, you can put URLs and make them URLs so that you can then connect to different things. You can import this notebook into your workspace. So download the workbook, and if you go to the data science part of the Fabric workspace, that's how you import in the notebook. You don't have to remember how to do that because he tells you. So if you go to the data science bit, so you go to that data science bit, when you click on that data science bit, you can then import in a notebook, because it actually took me a while to realize how to import in a notebook, because you can create a new notebook, or so basically all these instructions are here. Obviously you need to have a lake house within your particular workspace, but if you forget how to do that, there are instructions there on how to attach a lake house, which is there to hold the data. So once you've held the data, you install Semantic Link, which is the library. So remember, we talked about libraries, Garmin, etc., Beautiful Soup, Pandas, NumPy, blah, blah, blah. Then once you've imported the SemPy.fabric as Fabric in, then what it does is it'll list all my data sets, fabric.list data sets. Then the data set I want it to use is this one that he suggested. You can obviously change it to any that you want to change it to what you want to do, but just for the first time when you're running through it, it's useful to use this particular one. List all the measures in my data set. Okay then, and it just lists them all for you. So within the measures, it tells you basically what the measures are, what the expression is, data type, whether they're hidden or false, if they've got a display folder, have they got any measure description? They haven't, so they should have. what if there are any format strings. So all of these useful things that we need to understand about our measures. And once we've pulled all these measures in, you can actually get it within the notebook to evaluate a measure from a PBIX that is in the workspace, in the report, in your Python notebook. So, I mean, that's incredibly cool if you're checking things or you're testing something, or if you're writing a Python notebook to explain something and it's dynamic because it's referring to the PBIX. So you can think of all sorts of ways that you could actually use this. You can even write your data sets with your group by. So again, I can pull out different tables, different group bys, different things that I might want to pull out from a published report into a notebook. So all sorts of examples. I can apply filters. So I can apply the filters and then create another table. So it's the way that we've got this one source of truth, we've got our data set, we've published it, and now we can use notebooks to actually analyze and use that data set as well. We can analyze and use that data set across different group by columns from within the model. And we can evaluate multiple measures. So we're creating this beautiful Python notebook where we can actually format and we can write explanations using a published report and data set. So we're using one thing. And then we can also use our XMLA endpoint if we want. So that's just one thing, the Power BI measures tutorial. But we also have on here, we can clean our data. So again, in this case, we're importing in SemPy. We're setting up our notebook. It's all set up. And you don't even have to install a library. What you can do is you can actually, oh, I've got an issue. Not least. We can import our modules. So it doesn't like that because it's not pulled it in. I won't spend a lot of time messing around with it. But you can see if it's downloading a particular data set for us to use, then we're exploring the data. And at the bottom, it's starting the session and it'll tell you which code that it's going through each time. And then, so if it fails on something, you can see where it's failed and then you can work back and you can understand why it's failed. And if you don't have an understanding of why it's failed, copy it, put it into your AI source of truth and say, can you tell me why this has failed? And then it will usually come back and it'll give you some pointers. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's not right, and sometimes it is. Sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's rubbish. And now I have said to it, you're completely barking. It says, yeah, my bad. And so it's something that but again, it's part of that learning process. So one of the things, we're coming towards the end, but one of the things that was posted today was, so does anyone know Chris Webb? Chris Webb, yeah, he's complete. Yeah, he's a complete guru, isn't he? So you get the likes of, so you need to take a picture of this for him. So you get the likes of Chris Webb working with Michael Kowalski. It's just genius. So Chris is an absolute Power Query genius. Well, he's just a genius of everything. And so he's always interested in size and how quickly things work, and he likes to compare them and see how things are working. So you get him working with Michael Kowalski. So they pull in the SemPy labs as labs, and then you can get the query dependencies from a specific DAX string. So you can put in your DAX string in there, and what it will do is it shows you. So this is our DBA over there. So what it does is it shows you the columns that it's using within the DAX query. Then it shows you the size of the columns that are used within that DAX query. So if you've got something that's taken forever to run, or you're interested in the size or the speed of a particular query, it gives you that information. And if you don't even want that information, what you can do is you can say, okay, tell me what the memory size is. So you can evaluate, you can actually go through and then evaluate all of your different queries to see which are the ones that are taking up lots of time. So this was posted in LinkedIn this morning, and I'm on the train coming up from Plymouth. Wi-Fi is shite, but it's so simple that I can still get it to work using the Wi-Fi on a train coming up, because what Michael is trying to do is to make things as easy as possible for us, you know, to look at the admin side of our tenants. So you can even pull out all of the tenant settings within your Power BI workspaces or your Power BI tenants. And then the final thing is, so coming up, we have PBIR reports, which are going to be looking at the visual layer of the reporting. Semantic Link Labs will be able to allow us to attach to the actual visual level of the reports, so that not only can we do this by looking at our models, we'll also be able to do it by looking at our reports and setting up things like consistent font size, different themes, different colors, all of the type of things which are a complete pain in the neck because you can't attach them or program them. So as PBIR reports come in, then Semantic Link Labs will have libraries which will allow us to then automate some of the reporting and consistency that we use using that. So what we've gone through today, and I think that's where I'm at. Yeah. Oh, last thing. So Power BI is cool, notebooks are cool. So there are organizational apps. So organizational apps are slightly different from normal apps. And with organizational apps, you can have on here, I can have my Power BI report, but I can also pull in my, let's hope it works. I can also pull in my notebooks so that I've got all of my data in one place. I've got my exploratory things, been a bit slow, here we go. So I've got an organizational app, which has got Power BI reports and workspaces. And then I can either put in what I want to put in, or I can then pull in my notebook and I can have my markdown in there, which will actually explain how things are happening, as well as just giving the code. And what you can do in Jupyter Notebooks, you can set up to decide whether you just want the code showing or you want the results showing. And I don't think this is doing that yet, but I suspect it won't be far away. Yeah, yeah. So what we have in here, I'm going to hand over to Laura in a minute. So I hope this, I've got to do my little finishing bit. There we go. So hopefully you'll see why I think Python is so incredibly cool. It is very cool. It's our Swiss Army knife. It allows us to do all sorts of things to play with our data, to get it to enable us to do things. Why is it so cool? Because they're just very, very cool libraries that we can pull in to do whatever it is we need to do. So the way that I've used it within my work is just data manipulation, APIs, reporting, visualization, some machine learning, a little bit of SemPy and Semantic Link Labs. So hopefully I've inspired you, if you haven't used Python yet, to give it a go. And if you have used Python, hopefully you'll have a go at some of the Semantic Link Labs, because they're quite interesting and cool to use. And that's me done. Thank you.